Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome to Africa This Week with me, Annisa Omar. This show looks at the affairs of sub-Saharan Africa and the African diaspora. On today's programme, we'll update you on the Ugandan elections that took place and some of the controversies surrounding that. Continuing on with our gaze on long-term presidential runs, we discuss the Democratic Republic of Congo and the protests taking place there. Lastly, we have a report on how Gabonese are seeking riches in the gold mining industry. But first, Somalia's former defence minister was killed on Monday in a car bomb, the latest string of attacks in the capital, Mogadishu. Adama Munu has more on this and the rest of the week's headline news.
Somalia's former defence minister was killed in a car bomb on Monday, the latest in a string of attacks in the capital, Mogadishu. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the explosion in the central Kafur district of the city, but Al-Qaeda-linked Shabab insurgents have carried out similar bombings in the past. Insurgents in Burundi threw a series of grenades on Monday, killing a child and wounding at least 30 people in the latest in a string of attacks. Men on a motorbike threw 3 grenades in the heart of the city, while 2 other blasts were reported in a northern suburb. Shops, banks and offices remained closed and streets empty of traffic in Guinea's capital, Conakry, and in other cities on Monday. It marked the first day of an open-ended general strike called by trade unions. Union leaders are demanding that prices of basic commodities and fuel be brought down by the government, whilst also pressing home pay claims. Benin's Angelique Kidjo won the Best World Music Album of the Year at this year's Grammys in Los Angeles. As Niger prepares for the first round of its presidential vote on Sunday, supporters of both President Issoufou Mahamadou and jailed opposition candidate Hama Amadou campaigned in the streets of the capital, Niamey.
Un homme juste, un homme clair, tu vois, un homme sérieux aussi. Donc vraiment, Inch'Allah, le 21, on va voter pour lui. On va le prendre du prison jusqu'au président, Inch'Allah.
wallahi wannan gwamnati yana kokari wallahi dan saboda inda ba yi kokari ba a kare da su suna cikin wannan biranen duka amma wallahi yanzu alhamdulillah ko ba gani ba alhamdulillah tunda inda suke nan daga can dai ne an tsaida su har zuwa samu suka shigo ba so za ba su bari iko bai bari ko yace yana aika su wallahi alhamdulillah.
Zimbabwean former Vice President Joyce Mujuru announced on Wednesday that she's forming a new party to challenge President Robert Mugabe's ZANU-PF in a move that could shake up the country's politics. The new party is called We Are People First and sets to oppose Mugabe, who turns 92 on Sunday. At least 53 people died in Ghana when a bus hit a truck head-on in Kintampo overnight, about 260 miles north of the capital, Accra. The crash, which occurred late in the night on Wednesday, is the country's deadliest for years. The Metro mass transit coach was heading to the northern town of Tamale from the second largest city of Kumasi when it collided with a cargo truck loaded with boxes of tomatoes. Police Chief Maxwell Atingane said many of the bus passengers died on the spot, adding 23 were injured, some seriously, and were being treated at a local hospital. Sudan's People's Liberation Army on Thursday resumed the process of redeploying its forces outside Juba. This follows terms in the peace agreement signed between government forces and rebels in August last year. The provision required military forces to move around 15 miles outside the centre of the capital, with the first batch of 250 SPLA soldiers having redeployed to Mogari last November. Cameroon police on Wednesday stopped opposition members from distributing leaflets, asking President Paul Biya, who's been in power since 1982, not to run again for the presidential election in 2018.
Nous conseillons M. Biya qu'il est déjà vieux pour qu'il saute par la grande porte, qu'il ne se représente plus.
Polls opened in Uganda's presidential and parliamentary elections on Thursday, but several stations in the capital were delayed, awaiting ballot papers. Voting was due to begin at 7 o'clock a.m., 4 a.m. London time, But despite queues forming outside polling booths, many had still not opened over an hour later. Initial results are expected as early as Saturday afternoon, with the leading candidate requiring more than 50% of votes cast to avoid a second-round runoff. Late on Monday, Kizza Besigye, a three-time failed presidential candidate who heads the Forum for Democratic Change Party, was held after street clashes as he campaigned in the capital Kampala. Besigye has been repeatedly arrested in the past and is commonly freed without charge shortly after. The marked difference this time round were allegations of the deaths of 3 people being shot dead, according to opposition politicians. These claims could not be independently verified.
Joining us to discuss that last story of the Ugandan elections, here in the studio is David Lodda, who is an East African analyst, and in Kampala, Uganda, we have the journalist Halima Athumani. Thank you for coming on, both guys. So, Halima, what's going on the ground?
I think I should start with where you mentioned that the polling actually started 1 hour later, which, yes, in some places it started 1 hour later, some places it started 4 hours later, some places it started as late as 7 hours later, which was about 4 p.m. our time, local time in Uganda. So it really started very late, and this caused a lot of chaos, a lot of chaotic reactions from crowds, from voters, people who woke up as early as 6 a.m. to vote. Unfortunately for them, they spent the whole day under the scorching sun, waiting patiently, but also those who got impatient. There was a lot of chaos, people burnt property, some places where ballot papers were brought, but only for the local elections and not the presidential elections. Some rowdy voters actually got those ballot papers, burnt them. There was really a lot of drama, a lot of chaos in the city yesterday, especially because the delays were mainly in Kampala city and Wakiso district. So this was very problematic.
So the chaos was, would you say that the chaos was instrumental? Was it formulated in terms of delays in the voting material, as well as other actors that were in play, or do you think it was just a bureaucratic dilemma?
I think people are mainly reacting because for once we had a massive turnout of Ugandans getting out to vote, which has not been the case in the past 3 elections that we've had. Most of the times previously we had Ugandans say, oh, even if I went out to vote, my vote will really not make a difference. But for the first time we had all these campaigns for people to get out and vote, and believe me, you Ugandans listened to this message, and for once Ugandans came out to vote. And when they woke up as early as 6:30 a.m. to queue in these long lines, and then they did not get the voting material right their own time, it was a problem. For example, right next to my house there is a polling station. I left my house about 6:15 a.m. and went and made a couple of rounds. Many of the polling stations did not have polling material by about 10 a.m. When I got back to just have a break around 11:30 a.m., the polling station next to my house did not have polling material. So I called the Electoral Commission spokesperson and said, what is going on? And the response was actually very interesting. He said, we are using one truck to transport polling material, which was very funny because this is something that they planned ahead 5 years. They had 5 years to plan for this, and on the last day they actually decide not to decide to delay voting material. But also to some people,
Halima, just to bring our other guest David into the conversation, in terms of 5 years of planning, do you think that it is a lack of precision, or do you think that this vote rigging and the delaying of voting materials is unusual, or a consequence of historical events?
Well, it's unusual in terms of the length of time, i.e. people waiting for up to 7 hours to vote, because that is unprecedented. And I'm curious to know the delays around Kampala and Wakiso, but there was also said to be rain in Gulu, the northern part of Uganda. I don't know if there were delays there as well, and if so, for how long. However, in terms of planning, I don't think it's excusable to say that we had one track, because as Halima rightly put it, there was a period of 5 years to plan for these elections, and the dates were arranged and fixed. Therefore, it's inexcusable.
And the lifting of the constitutional term, what do you make of this? Do you think this is legitimizing what's going on?
Well, the lifting of the constitutional terms, critics of the current government may see it as such, as, to perpetuate President Museveni's stay in power, or the NRM, National Resistance Movement. Well, they may see it as such, because inevitably, they've been complaining of certain difficulties, i.e. in campaigning, i.e. intimidation, for instance, by the government soldiers and agencies, yes.
And just to give our audience a better understanding of Uganda, Museveni has been in power for quite some time, and he has been credited as bringing economic and social stability relatively to Uganda, given the past of Idi Amin and other leaders. Do you think that this is a way of not only continuing this reign, as it were, or do you think it's a way of perhaps creating a new path for fresh blood?
As in staying in power for long, President Museveni has been in power since, January 1986, yes. However, some of his critics say that part of the time he spent in power was he was unelected. So it was, according to them, unconstitutional. However, now that it's constitutional, he gives, he gives the reasons, or one of the reasons he gives to stay in power, is that he wants an East African Federation, and that's his goal. So when that will take place, I don't know. So the question is, if it's not achieved by, or in 5 years from now, will he stay in power again?
But to create this federation, do you think that there should be democratic leaders within, or is he just using that as a way of continuing on his leadership?
Well, he believes in democracy, but him as an individual, in order for him to contest for the presidency, he says he will contest, currently he was saying he would contest until that vision is achieved of the East African Federation. So that's his goal.
So to bring Halima back into the conversation, Halima, what do you think? Do you think that limiting and getting rid of, effectively, the constitutional term was the way forward, or do you think it has been the fruits of what's going on now?
I think to a certain extent, many people hoped that before then, with us having term limits, it probably would enable more democratic elections take place, and that would mean that president would come in after every 5 years. But then eventually later we come to see the president bribing all these members of parliament, and then the constitutional term limits are lifted. To a certain extent, people have gotten, because right now we have a population of about 86% who are youth. Majority of these are between, apart from the young, most of these, if you say, are old, about 36, 34. So for many, all they have seen is Museveni regime, Museveni, Uganda that is under Museveni. And for many of them, they really yearn for change. These are people who were not there when Idi Amin was there, or when Obote was there. So that is the lesser part of the population. So we now have new blood, and I think that is what one of his former Prime Minister, Amama Mbabazi, right now, who is also a presidential candidate, has been riding on, saying, I want to bring change, but also change from one generation to another.
So Uganda is one of the most media literate countries in Africa. So do you think the education that this literacy has brought, but also just the understanding that there is this idea of democracy, that has moved young people?
Oh yes, very many young people are moved out. Have been moved because of the democracy. For example, like I said previously, many people would not really give much thought to elections. But and I think when you look at the messages that most of the civil society members have been churning out to the population, is telling them you need to vote to get the change that you deserve. And because they are mainly aiming at the youthful young population, who they know are yearning for change, who they know actually want to see something different. Because if you talk about the Bush War, right now, if you listen to President Museveni, everything that he says, there is no way he can finish a speech without talking about 1986. And for and for a youthful person, every time he goes, in 1986, Uganda, and someone goes, you know, for the youth, it is more like, okay, we've had this 1986, can we go past it? Which we don't seem to be going past, because we've had the same president for 30 years now, and he's seeking for another 5 years, and he's actually leading right now in the polls. So you can see the dilemma that most of Ugandans are in right now.
So David, what do you think? That Uganda is the young people now? We need to move past the rhetoric of Idi Amin?
Yes, because, well, pre-1986, a lot of them who were born from then, from 1986 onwards, have not experienced war. So that, to them, is not of very much relevance in the current circumstances, because their most immediate concerns are jobs and opportunities to improve their lives, and better provision of services to the people of Uganda, rather than, you know, peace. Because I was surprised to hear this, we have peace now, we vote for peace now. Yes, but if they were born in the 80s, i.e. by 86, well, they've experienced peace. So apart from having peace, then how about services, delivery of services, freedom of speech or action, even contesting in elections fairly and freely without intimidation? And
the intimidation aspect is brought on in terms of the opposition leaders being arrested three times in 1 week. Is this unusual in terms of the leader knowing that actually the young people are very powerful, and that this repression is perhaps the only way that he can remain in power?
Well, arresting of opposition leaders, well, is not something new. It's happened before, especially if Dr. Kizza Besigye has been arrested several times before. However, for the young people, I'm not sure if, well, they get angry. His supporters, obviously, are very angered at the various attempts to intimidate them or stop them from participating in the political process freely and fairly. So that is the anger. That's why the opposition is projected as violent or non-law-abiding by the media down there. Yes, because they are kind of reactionary to these intimidation tactics or tactics they see as intimidatory. Yes.
And new and modern tactics with the blocking of social media sites.
Yes.
And we can perhaps get a comment from Halima on that. Halima, what has your experience been with the blocking of these sites?
Personally, I have not been on Facebook or WhatsApp or Twitter since yesterday at 8 a.m. That's when I think every Ugandan woke up to the realization that they actually cannot access the social websites. But there are those who've used the VPN and have been able to get online. However, this is just for a certain few people who actually are able to get through to bypass the whole blocking. And I think today morning, the largest mobile telecommunication service provider, that is MTN, sent out messages saying that they were ordered by the Uganda Communications Commission to switch off all social media outlets and the mobile money service. So right now, I think all that Ugandans can depend on when it comes to the information coming in from the fields regarding elections is through television, radio, and newspapers. Other than that, everyone is in the dark. So we just wait. And according to the police, the reason was that yesterday they said that they are doing this for safety reasons and also because they cannot control content. But also the president came out to say that Ugandans should not think that when we use these social media outlets, it doesn't mean that they cannot control them. And according to them, social media is used to, according to the president, he says social media is used to tell a lot of lies. So they just needed to control the lies. And then after this whole situation is done, then they can always reinsert the internet for everyone else.
So what hope do you think there is, Halima? Do you think it's positive that young people are coming out and going against this new wave of repression? Or do you think actually Museveni may get this term?
I think there's a kind of hope, but right now we can't really say much because provisional results right now give President Museveni a 62.82% lead, and this is out of the 44.51% of the polling stations counted. Dr. Besigye is following closely with about 32.72% of the votes right now. That's about so Museveni has 2,715,914 votes, while Dr. Kizza Besigye has 1,414,708 votes that have been cast so far. To a certain extent, yes, we still wait. The Electoral Commission is almost going to give us going to make a fifth announcement of the provisional results. So we wait to see. Though, of course, there are those who are hopeful that maybe there will be a runoff because about 56% of the polling stations have not been counted yet. So maybe we'll see if there's going to be a difference in the results as they come through until 4 p.m. tomorrow.
David, what do you think? Do you think Museveni winning is likely?
I think it's very likely he will win, yes. Well, reason being, various reasons. Going back to this social media blockage first. Blockage of social media, there was a paradox, actually, contradiction, because the chairman of the Uganda Communications Commission, Mr. Fred Otunu, was saying it was due to security reasons, and the president seemed to contradict that by saying it was due to lies. Now, he didn't specifically say what the lies were or who told those lies. However, it came to my attention during the voting time during the voting time, that the former president of Kenya, there was a tweet under hashtag Museveni decides, or Uganda decides. And then the former president of Kenya, Daniel R. Moi, made a comment that every time, i.e. 1992 and 97, when Kenyans were deciding who should govern them, he had already predetermined the outcome. And therefore, he kind of empathizes with what's happening on the other side of the border. He knows, i.e., that's the impression he gave. And then another tweet by Raila Odinga saying poor countries like Uganda should be barred from holding elections because their people are not getting value for money or something to that effect.
Value for a tweet, maybe.
So I suppose that preempted or contributed to the blockage, because prior to that, politicians in Uganda had been critical of government programs or actions or inactions, and there was no such blockage.
So what do you make in terms of the elections being a way of gaining not only an understanding of what a democracy can do for young Ugandans, but also a way of really bringing forth the economic and social plight that has been so rampant within the country?
Elections as a way of gaining an understanding of what Ugandans can do. Mm-hmm. Well, if it's done fairly and freely, yes, but allegedly the opposition groups say, it's rigged. So inevitably, well, if Museveni wins, as looks inevitable according to the current results, then that will be the choice, of president that Ugandans will have made in these elections. In terms of outcomes, as in their life chances, improvement of life chances as in jobs or education or social services, well, you got the young people, there's an 83% unemployment. So for me, those who have been, I have been speaking to have shown more like desperate to improve their life chances. So if they're promised that, then they'll probably go with whoever promises them that.
The bread and butter issues.
Yes.
Halima, what do you think? Do you think politics can make a difference to the lives of young people?
I think the question for many young people throughout these elections is, how do I get myself a better life? And just like David said, we have about 83% of youth who are unemployed, who try to live a life, but you have poor education system. Yes, we have the universal primary education for all, the universal secondary education for all, but then you question the quality of education. We've got poor health facilities, I think, and this is something that the opposition candidates have also been riding on on. For example, what became big news was when Dr. Kizza Besigye visited one of the hospitals in northern Uganda in Abim district and found a very appalling situation, no doctors. And this actually speaks for many health facilities in the country. And then you look at things like roads, you look at issues of jobs, because right now for many of the young people, you only get a job probably if you know someone at a certain place. So it really comes down to what is there for us, what is in it for us tomorrow. Today, yes, we have a president and this is how our lives are, but is this going to change?
Well, thank you for your comments, Halima and David. Unfortunately, we'll need to end it there. Now we have a special report from South Africa on 2 young black men who were killed late January this year, allegedly at the hands of 4 white South African farmers and a policeman after an apparent farm attack. It highlights the deep racial divisions that exist in the country more than 2 decades after the end of apartheid. Helen Percival has this report.
Barbed wire snakes the street in front of the court in Parys, a small agricultural town in central South Africa. On one side, whites flying right-wing flags decrying what they call the genocide of their people. On the other, black protesters singing "Kill the Farmer." 2 black farm workers were murdered here last month. Inside the court, 4 farmers and a police officer, all white, stand accused of their murder. What exactly happened on the day Samuel Chiekla and Shean Tangasha were killed has become a racially inflamed matter of interpretation. Tangasha's family claim he was murdered after insisting his employer give him over $1,000 in unpaid wages.
Sian went on Monday and said he was going to Bosberta to get his money, and he walked there on Monday, but he never came back.
But the murders also come at a time of extreme fear in South Africa's farming community. According to Afrikaner rights group AfriForum, a rash of violent robberies between 1990 and 2015 killed around 1,800 farmers and labourers, and farmers say they cannot rely on the police to stop them. Supporters of the accused claim the murdered men attacked the farmer. When he pressed a panic button, dozens came running.
We know that there is a complete breach of trust between local communities and the police when it comes to farm murders. Farm murders and farm attacks. Last year, for example, has been the year in which the most farm attacks ever has been recorded in South Africa. And at the same time, we hear statements by political leaders in which violence towards farmers are being romanticized.
An attempted farm attack or a labour dispute gone horribly wrong. To the protesters outside the court, the facts of the case appear to make little difference. For them, the incident is merely proof of the deep racial divisions that continue to haunt South Africa.
After the break, we'll be taking a look at how people in the Democratic Republic of Congo are taking a swipe at efforts for President Kabila to further extend his power. Don't go away.